I think I can use that much. Okay.
Yeah. You ready?
I believe so.
It's now 5 o'clock and I would like to call this meeting to order. I'd like to welcome those who are participating in the Board of Education meeting in person and those watching the meeting via live streaming on YouTube. We would ask that anyone addressing the board to use the microphone at the podium and to identify themselves for the record. As a reminder, the link to the meeting is on the district webpage under Board of Education. The streaming will run through the end of the meeting. In the event there is a disruption in the audio portion, I will pause the meeting until it is reestablished. I am wondering if Mr. Jim Rickey would come forward, please, and lead the Pledge of Allegiance for us tonight. Yes, please. For those of you who don't know Mr. Rickey, he is quite a community person and is out and responsible for so many nice things that happen in this community. So thank you very much for agreeing. You would stand with me for the pledge. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. One nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. We do not have a candy bag for you, but we will work on that one.
You can have a piece of leaf. Brownie.
Andy, yeah. Thank you again, Mr. Rickey. Mrs. Wolf, would you please call attendance or take roll and announce it for the minutes? Present. Present.
Present. Present. Present.
Thank you very much. Dr. Keller, would you please announce the meeting?
Madam President, this meeting has been announced in accordance with the Open Meetings Resolution and is a legally constituted meeting of the Los Lunas Schools Board of Education.
Thank you very much. Dr. Keller, are there any changes or deletions to the agenda?
Dr. Osowski, there are no recommended changes or deletions this evening.
Thank you very much. I would stand for a motion regarding the approval of the agenda.
Madam President, I move to approve the agenda as set.
Thank you very much. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Otero. Mr. Bennett has moved and Mrs. Otero has seconded to approve the agenda as submitted. Is there any discussion from any members of the board? Having no discussion, I will call for the vote. Mr. Vickers,
Yes.
Mrs. Otero,
Yes.
Mr. Tally,
Yes.
Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Motion passes. We do not have any public comment. Is that correct, Mrs. Wolf? Thank you very much. We are just zipping right through this. We are now on item E, presentation and consideration of preliminary approval of elementary enrollment and boundary study addendum. This is contingent upon final geocoding of the elementary student enrollment the spring prior to the opening of the new Ann Parish Elementary. Dr. Kettler, would you please lead this discussion?
Madam President, members of the board, this evening we have Colleen with us from Visions and Planning. She and her staff have been working on the elementary enrollment and boundary study for quite some time. These numbers this evening have been updated based off of data that we shared with Visions and Planning a little over a week ago. So I will turn it over to Colleen for the presentation.
Good evening, everyone. I want to kind of give a little background on this project. It's been, gosh, going on almost 3 years now, when we first started this. And part of the requirements for getting Peralta rebuilt and for being able to move forward on Ann Parish was doing an enrollment and boundary study. And that was based upon the requirements of PSFA. We did that. It looked like everything was moving forward. The district did move forward on Peralta. And now we understand that the ed specs have been completed for Ann Parish for 540 students. But now we've got an issue of everything's being held up because the state really wants to verify that there is enough students living in the area to support a school of that size. So what we've done as part of an update, we've updated the report, and it shows exactly the recommendations and all of the updated data to reflect that there is, yes, enough students in Ann Parish. There are some minor modifications to the attendance zones and that would be needed, but it also will, in turn, once those changes are implemented, also help with transportation, because right now you jump from one area within Ann Parish and then you go to Valencia or you go to RGE. And so now it'll have to be one contiguous zone with everybody in that area. And some of those would be walkers that you would no longer have to provide transportation for. So there is some cost savings benefit. As part of that report, we also looked at Desert View and Tomei. We kind of have the same thing, hop over instead of having contiguous zones. And so we were able to clean that up as well. So the information I'm going to provide you tonight is just an update of all of that information. And one of the things that we need to have to move forward according to PSFA is preliminary approval of these attendance zone changes. They would have to be revised and reviewed the spring prior to the school opening. So that if there's, let's say we find we had 700 kids and there were 600 kids, we can make some micro adjustments without having to start over. We have a good place for that. So with that being said, I just kind of want to go briefly and talk a little bit about demographics. Combined population in Los Lunas schools is about 4,688 people. 12,483 of those happen to be under 18. And those are our school age children and the students that we have coming into Los Lunas schools, both now and in the future, because some of those are under 5. So as you can see, there hasn't been a lot of growth, but there's been a lot of development. It's quite interesting. So looking at those 1,243 individuals under the age of 18, approximately 65.9% or 66% of those students actually attend school here in Los Lunas. The remaining under 18, about 34% are either enrolled at SOTA, they attend Berlin Consolidated Schools, or we have a chunk of those kids that are pretty hefty chunk that are under the age of 5. So they haven't even hit pre-K yet, or going to private pre-K where we can't quite track them exactly. And then looking at the diversity of the community, it's heavily Hispanic, and that matches up with the county in terms of what the comparison between the school district and the county, and it's virtually almost the same, the makeup of about 61% Hispanic versus 31% Anglo. And then looking at Spanish speakers, we have a high percentage of those, especially at the ages 5 to 17. And that's also reflected within a lot of the bilingual courses and classes that the district provides. And then looking at some additional indicators, we're looking at age by sex within the community is 37.8, which is higher. That is, starting to get outside of childbearing years. And then, and one of the things that's interesting about this graphic, my thing will work, is that you'll notice down here at the bottom, it's not as wide as the higher one. And that is directly attributed to lower birth rates when we look at those younger people. And then looking at the different characteristics in terms of households and what their budgets are, we're able to identify all of that. And then looking at population trends and key indicators, again, we've got 3.8% of generation, the greatest generation, I guess, and then baby boomers are still account for about almost 21% of the population, while Gen X is close to 20% as well. The millennials and the Gen Z, which are the ones that are typically our parents at this point, are now in the higher 20s, higher to mid 20s. Generation Alpha is only at 9% because they are fairly new. And again, looking at it's not a huge amount. And just looking overall at the workforce, we have 21.5% of the people that live in Los Lunas are service oriented versus 25.4% that are blue collar. And then we have about 53% that are actually white collar, which does tend to indicate higher incomes as well. And we have a chart that breaks them all down by where the highest industries, healthcare is the highest industry for employment. And then just looking at the overview versus home values and household income, the highest percentage of people within Los Lunas earn between $50,000 to $75,000, and the average house is in that $300,000 range. So looking at enrollment, I think this is where we really want to get to some information. Since 2014-15, the overall district enrollment has declined by 2.7%. Between 2019 and 20 and the 23-24 school year, district enrollment declined an additional 3.6%. Elementary enrollment is on the decline. That is also because of lower birth rates within the county. And this is not just a countywide issue. This is also a statewide issue as well as a national issue. Largest elementary decline was between 2019-20 and 2021 of 10.6%. We know that's directly attributed to COVID. Since then, the district has been kind of like slowly gaining back those kiddos, but it's not, they're gone. And this again is not typical of just this district, it's statewide. This has happened. Middle school enrollment has declined 5.7%, while high school enrollment has actually increased by 11.1%. The peak elementary enrollment was in the 2015-16 year at almost 5,000 students at 4,913. And middle school enrollment was in the 21-22 school year, where there were 26-23 students enrolled. High school peaked in 2019-20. So keeping that in mind, that those are some of those cohorts on some of these in the most couple of recent years that will be moving forward. And then taking a look at each school, just in 5 years, it's been 9.5% decline. Again, that largest decline was in that 2021 school year. But when we look at Ann Parish, the enrollment at that school has declined 17%. Higher than that is Peralta at 24.7. And then the other schools that also had significant declines were Bosque Farms, Comay, and Valencia. Those were the top schools that saw the largest enrollment declines within since 2019. Typically, kindergarten enrollment within the district averages between 62.9 and 65.7% of the number of children born in Valencia County in the preceding 5 years. We're able to track that because we are able to look at both SOTA and also Belen and we're able to do the math behind the curtain there and figure out what that is. One of the good things is that Department of Vital Statistics does, regardless of where you have your baby, they do acknowledge where you live as part of that. So if you go up to Albuquerque and you have your child up there, it still reflects for Valencia County. Pre-K enrollment is close to 48% of the children born in the prior 4 years in Valencia County as well. Not quite as high because there are other pre-K providers throughout the community. In Valencia County, birth rates have seen minor fluctuations. You can see it kind of goes up and down. And then when we go up and down with it, we're able to see it almost virtually match kindergarten enrollment. So we know when we have a dip, we see the dip, and then we see the high points. There's only been 2 years that have had some large spikes in 2017 and again in 2021. We're waiting on additional data from Department of Vital Statistics, as is every other agency within the state on more recent birth rates. It's anticipated that the migration of new families will have a positive impact within the district, but it's not a lot of new people moving into the community. There's some of these new housing built, a lot of it is almost a shell game, people moving up and purchasing higher end homes versus moving into the community. So you have them moving around the district, not a bunch moving in. So looking at projected enrollment by school year, we had 4196. This does not include the family school in that number because they do not have the direct impact on the district's facilities as much. It's expected to increase because there is more economic development within the community that is occurring, as well as additional new housing that's going, especially over in Huning Ranch and other areas. The post-construction of Peralta will provide additional elementary capacity to handle some growth if needed, but it's also set to be a pre-K center for some of the schools on the east side of the district. We are going to have to take a look at Raymond Gabaldon separately because the district has received 2 different awards. And while PSFA required this report to address both of them, it has put a stop to both of them equally. So what we're doing with this updated report is separating the 2 so that we could have further discussion on what needs to happen at RGE, and then we'll provide a supplement to the report for PSFA in regards to what has to happen over there. So just taking a look at the existing attendance zones. We've got 10 elementary schools. And I do want to mention 2 different things that are different than what has been traditionally seen in the past. And this was something that we've discussed with the prior boards and such, is that the area below the main Sundance right here was just empty, not identified, as was the area that is still part of Isleta Pueblo up there to the northeast. And there's people that live in some of those areas. When we geocode them, we can see a couple of dots here and there. And then if we don't provide where they would go to school, then it's kind of just an open thing. So the idea is that one area, because only a very few come from the northeast corner, for them to go to Bosque Farms. That's the closest school really to them. And then in that lower area to be for an extended area as of now until another school is built in the future. That would pretty much encompass a portion of that as Huning Ranch gets built out. So just taking a look really quickly at the transfer rates, schools that have an enrollment that consists 25% of in transfer students, I have 5 schools: Bosque Farms, KGE, Los Lunas Elementary, RGE, and Sundance. And while some of the transfers have been reduced over the past couple of years, those 5 schools tend to see higher in-transfer rates. You have a significant number of students that come from Belen and outside of the entire school district. They're from Albuquerque and other areas. So what we've been able to do is identify all of those kiddos where they live in relation to the district boundaries. We also have an area, and I'll show it here on the next map, where we have the district has an MOU with Isleta Pueblo, and it's to allow students that live within that area to either attend school in Los Lunas or to attend school in Albuquerque. They have the ability to choose where they go. So when we look at these, here I have Sundance has a capacity or enrollment of 581, but 381 of those students actually attend their home school. The rest are in transfer students. KGE has 614 enrollment, but they have 364 that attend their home school. But with KGE, we also have 441 students that live in that attendance zone. So that school, when you think about capacity, has enough capacity to serve that area. And then it's going above and more because of all the in-transfers. And in-transfer students, based upon NMSA on the priority ranking, those kids get priority first, the kids that live within each one of these attendance zones. And then there's other subsets of that for criteria for it. Bosque Farms had an enrollment, 120-day enrollment of 458. 333 of those students actually attend school there. And when I look at the fact that the school has a capacity of 535, so we have schools that definitely have significant capacity available. And this kind of summarizes the functional capacities of each of the schools. We don't use maximum capacity. Maximum capacity is based upon how many kids you can stuff in each and every single room, regardless of what is being taught in that room, what needs are. So whether it's special ed, elementary special classes, and all of that, they want to know if you had to max load that school, what it is. When we calculate functional capacity, we take into account, D-level classrooms, we take into account music and cafeteria or multi-purpose rooms, art, all the specials. We take into account any counseling as well as PTO, TSLP as well. So those are all taken out. So that's why the capacities will always show lower than what's max. And we look at it both with portables and without portables because the district does have a significant number of portables across the district. So based on the total functional capacity of the district's elementary schools in current use, the district overall has a 91.5% utilization rate when averaged together across all schools without portables, but that does get further reduced to 83.1% with portable. And with all of the seats available, as we like to call them, within each classroom, the utilization rate is only 77.8%. Again, that does show that there is available capacity in a lot of the schools, even if it may not feel like it, there is there. 9 of the 10 elementary school sites do have the portables. Some of them are used for non-educational purposes, storage, and such. And so if those never had to be put back into service, that would give them the available capacity that they need. So looking at the proposed elementary zone changes, I want to kind of first talk about housing because that also helps inform where we're having to go with this. We keep tabs on the district's housing construction. We rotate that through our office about every 2.5, 3 months, because that's how the data gets published, so that we're able to keep up with it. Since January of 24, there's been a 48.7% increase in the sale of homes, with 119 homes sold just within the Los Salinas area since January. Majority of those home sales were in the Huning Ranch and Fiesta developments, which are either impacting Sundance or KGE. They have the highest average home prices, followed by the Los Maravillas area. Based on the latest report by this Greater Albuquerque Realtors Association, right now there's 57 new listings within the district, and while there was 47 closed sales recorded compared to the year prior, the listings for new housing has declined about 33%, and that's directly attributed to mortgage interest rates. People just don't want to get into something bigger than what they can afford. Despite this, average sale prices within the community are in that $300,000 range back last year, and that has increased to almost $400,000 this year. Just taking a look at where some of these new housing developments are. We have some in Tomei, KGE area, and Sundance. So right now there's about 1,000 homes ready to be developed. Doesn't mean that they're sold yet. Only 580 so far. But we're able, again, like I said, we're able to track those developments. And then we look at the number of students that can be generated by the developments. And right now we're looking at 213 students total, but only about 45% of those, or 55% of those actually come into new to the district. Again, those rest of those just move around and move from one side of town to the other. And then we're able to look at how that generates towards middle school enrollment, about 50 kids, and then high school enrollment, about another 117. So looking at the proposed elementary zone changes, and this is, I have the 26-27 school year. That's the hope that we get this project moving and funded by PSFA within the next few months, because it does appear that it could be part of the July agenda, if we can get in the information. And so the school zones that are impacted are Los Lunas Elementary, Valencia, RGE, Ann Parish, Tomei, and Desert View. And as I mentioned before, you know, cleaning up these two areas really makes the difference. They're on the south east end. Cleaning up Ann Parish really makes a difference. In Valencia, there was like a little notch out and a little notch out that went to Los Lunas Elementary. It was very weird. We've cleaned all of that up and it's all nice and contiguous. And so again, before we implement any of these changes, we need to it's going to be 2 years out, because we need to know what the student population is at that point in time. And there are kids that may be affected by this that are in those schools now, but won't be there in 2 years. So we want to make sure that we know, based upon the 120-day account from the 24-25 school year, that we are able to re-geocode them again and take a look at that. And again, like I said, if we have to make any more tweaks or adjustments, we can. As part of this, and it was in the previous report submitted to PSFA, RGE was merged with the Los Lunas Elementary boundary. But again, as we are working towards separating out RGE, we're going to make a determination over this summer with the district on really what needs to happen for that school, so we can get that funding moving. It's too difficult to try to do them both because they need to be separate. They're separate awards. We need to figure that out. There are some potential adjustments that can be made. We do know that the new bridge, that whenever it finally gets constructed, is going to have a direct impact on Los Lunas Elementary and Valencia and Tomei, just because of proximity and all the property that will be for sale for new housing once that bridge connects. So looking at the proposed changes, all of the zones will now be contiguous, one zone each, allowing for smoother feeder patterns, especially at the middle and high school as we evaluate those once RGE is completed. Transportation no longer has to serve multiple areas for some of the schools. The number of students within Ann Parish currently have 583 students, including pre-K. When I take pre-K off, we hit the nail on the head for what we need there. And we still know that we're going to have some transfers here and there. That's just the nature of the beast. So we know that we are coming exactly right in with the number that the PSFA is looking for. And this is going to allow that time for final determination for RGE and Los Lunas Elementary. As part of that, we are able to also take a look at what this looks like by grade level. Once we geocoded all the students, not only did we did know where they went to school versus where they should be going to school, but then we also are able to take a look at it by grade level. So as things have to morph and change down the road, we're able to start to see how many kids per grade level are actually impacted. You know, based on the existing cohorts, we're estimating 525, 540 by the 26-27 school year. So again, it does come right back out to matching what is absolutely needed. And again, the RGE boundary will be addressed separately. So looking at what those recommendations that are going to be in the report, we've made some revisions for them. Looking at adopting the proposed attendance zone changes, as they're going to have the most long-term impact on providing the district with cohesive attendance zones and provide solid secondary school feeder patterns. And again, this is prior to the implementation of those proposed zones in their current form, and updated geocode analysis will be done. Again, we'll just verify where everybody is at. And what's neat about that is once we put the kids in and we pull them back out, then we have lists that we can provide the district of potential people that need to be notified. It is recommended the district administration update its school student attendance transfer procedures to reflect the community's current needs, because we still have a lot of inbound students. It's not to turn anybody away, it's just to make sure they're going where the district has capacity. And looking at expansion potentially at multiple sites of after-school programs, because we know that is also a need within this that has come up multiple times, and that sometimes some students attend certain schools based upon the access to after-school programs. We want to look at reconstructing Ann Parish Elementary for capacity of 540 students to serve the new attendance zone. This is consistent with the prior report. And then looking at replacement of RGE with a new pre-K center to accommodate the 160 students at its current location or at another school site. Again, this needs to be noted that, you know, most of those classrooms over at that school don't meet adequacy. There's no way to make them meet adequacy. And I do want to preface everything, adequacy standards are changing this summer. So if it's not in adequate now, it'll definitely not be adequate once the new adequacy standards come out. So this is going to be something that we review further this summer. And then, you know, if that goes through, we would have to have a 13 classroom addition over at Los Lunas Elementary. But again, we will be looking at that and smoothing that out this summer to figuring out what needs to happen. Maybe it's just a minor adjustment on the south east corner of the boundary for Los Lunas that maybe goes over to Valencia because there's capacity and those students move over and we don't have to build as many classrooms. So there are some ways that we are looking at also trying to reduce cost in some of these things. And then looking in the future, we're planning to build 2 new elementary schools, Huning Ranch, Fiesta area, probably in the next 7 to 12 years. You do have some time because you do have enough capacity throughout the district at this moment. And so I did have a conversation with PSFA today. We told them we would get them all the updated information by the end of this week. They only need a letter from the district showing that they want to proceed with the replacement of Ann Parish and based upon the student count, and then we can get everything in the queues and they're going to be ready to start reviewing it within the next week, pending your all's approval this evening.
That was an Impressive presentation, in a short amount of time. Thank you for that. Okay. I would stand for a motion regarding item E. After we have a motion and a second, can we have discussion?
The motion would be to approve the recommendation. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, I'll make that motion so that we can discuss it.
Awesome. Thank you. I have a motion by Mr. Vickers to approve the presentation of the elementary enrollment and boundary study as presented tonight. Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion as long as there's a discussion.
Yes, there is going to be a discussion. I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Mr. Vickers, would you like to lead the discussion?
Sure. So I have a couple of questions. On the proposed map, I think I see the river there. Is there going to be any cross river traffic with the elementary buses?
Which slide page are you on, Mr. Vickers? What does it say at the top?
I'm on that last page.
Okay,
of-
proposed.
Yeah.
Board
Thank
Member
you.
Vickers, the intent is to still keep things separated with the river at the moment. Because we know that they're already currently aligned that way. What this does do is right now in the Ann Parish area, you have students that have to go from all the way through Ann Parish, cross the river when they don't need to.
Right.
And so this eliminates all of that and it kind of helps keep that separate. And so, again, as we go through and look at anything refining for RGE, we'll look at that smooth, any areas in that to smooth that out. But we know that the river is a challenge. We know it's a significant challenge.
Right.
And so trying to keep buses from transporting students back and forth across it is what we would prefer to do.
So my other question is, in developing the new boundary lines, what group sat and made this decision? Who did you include?
We had district administration and community at from the prior report as part of that. We haven't changed anything in terms of these boundaries for this update. We're just providing new updated data to support what is proposed right now. And public comment and input will be part of that next phase that comes with the 120-day, because we're going to have to see where everything lies. Maybe things, like I said, certain zones may have to grow or contract a little bit. And maybe it's just a couple streets this way or that way. So that would be the time for public comment and input at that time.
So there was committees made up of community members that in the affected areas, especially.
I don't know exactly what that is off the hand, but that will occur this next go round before these are finalized. Because this is just the preliminary to prove that there is enough students. If these changes do get made, there are enough students to support the new construction.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Bennett?
Yes, my concern is we're looking at phasing out of Raymond Good Elementary, 26, 27, right? What about just doing it now? I mean, this is school in bad shape and budgetary wise, it's gonna keep costing us, and I'm just thinking if we wanna approve this map, and I like it, I'm just saying, why not shut down RG now? Let's save the money that we're not wasting, but spending in the school that eventually is gonna need to be rebuilt. So my concern is like, we're gonna keep feeding something that's not gonna provide for us, and why can't we just, instead of wait 2 years from now, let's do it now?
It is the district's or the board's prerogative if that things wanted to be implemented sooner. That is 100% okay. That would be where we would want to definitely have some meetings for that. But, that is your prerogative. What we're setting this up is based upon the construction of that new school. Because there's no need for a lot of people to change around. Although, if you look at the, Desert View and the Tomei area one down at the southern end, cleaning that up now sooner than later, even potentially even the Ann Parish doing that now, that's gonna save you transportation money.
Right.
That's just, but
That's-
again, that is your prerogative as a board. If that's something you choose, we can maybe figure out how to try to get some of that input or do something about it. School closures are difficult. And so starting it now with the intent for that to be fall will be kind of rough with the outpouring that you will get.
Mr. Bennett?
Thank you.
So if I'm looking at the chart, it's proposed elementary zone changes for 26-27. And from Ann Parish, it looks like 56 students that are in the Ann Parish attendance zone area go to Raymond Gabaldon right now, correct?
Mhm.
So following Mr. Bennett's line of thinking, if we started moving students back to Ann Parish, even if we just move students to Ann Parish as a first step before we have these other meetings, that would be at least 56 more students to Ann Parish. So less transportation. Those 56 students may not be as badly disrupted. I mean, any disruption is going to be a disruption. I don't mean to minimize this, but I'm thinking along with Mr. Bennett's thoughts, and I think I heard Mr. Vickers' concerns here with the community, that start phasing this in sooner rather than later, that would help our numbers with the PFCOC. Is that?
Yes, Madam President, you are correct. And the other thing is that, Ann Parish does currently have the capacity to take those 56 kids back.
That's what I thought.
And so, just keep in mind that you will have 56 more kids than anticipated on site during construction. So, that's easily worked around if that's strategically done. But, if you choose to, move forward with some of this sooner, we can definitely work with the board on trying to figure out where you want to start that out. And if you want to do the preliminary approval this evening to get it started and get the other project moving, then we can come back and work with the district administration on how to potentially make that happen sooner.
So if we, I hear your sense of urgency with getting something approved tonight so that we can get going on Ann Parish. That is absolutely imperative. So if we approve for the proposed boundary for Ann Parish at this time,
Mhm.
in order to get this moving, you're saying we can easily come back
Absolutely, that
and
is your prerogative.
readdress this boundary issue. We are not locked into these boundaries.
You are not locked into these boundaries. Again, that was every time we do this in districts across this state, we always know that you still have a year of design and at least 12 to 14 months of worth of construction. A lot can happen in your community within that time. You would never, ever want to lock in your boundary change for that particular area prior to knowing that, you know, what's going to change with those students. But we know that based upon where we are able to calculate capacity, we do have the ability to make some of these things happen sooner, but that's the district's will, the board's will of choosing to do that. Because there is available capacity at all those schools as we start to claw back those RGE kids back to their home area. So you can do that. And so we can turn this in with this preliminary approval, and then over the summer as part of the discussion to deal with the RGE, this can come back through and we can make any refinements or changes.
Dr. Kettler, in your knowledge of staffing, et cetera, could that be a first step for students that belong to Ann Parish? Given budget considerations, given that this is going to be a big move to begin with, and we're looking at 56 students, we're not looking at 500. So it's a small step. But every dime is going to count this next year. do you see any negative consequences that we should be thinking about? Yes, I want to fully acknowledge this for those 56 students. We are probably going to be irritating quite a few parents because they're used to this school. But at some point in time, we have to make this hard decision, and this is a budget issue as well as a logistics issue. Can you give this board any other information that should consider?
Madam President, members of the board, without knowing the makeup of those 56 students, because they're spread
Across grade level?
across grade levels, I could not give you detailed information on how many staff would need to be moved potentially or relocated from RGE specifically to Ann Parish, or if FTE would need to be added. I don't know what the numbers are currently at Ann Parish in specific grade levels. If it's adding 5 kids to a grade level, it would be less impactful than if, you know, it's 20 kids, because now you're up in an FTE, which, as you know. I don't see any negatives to making this move sooner rather than later. And I do believe we can creatively, through shifts in current staff, serve this all those students' needs, those 56 students. I do have one question, if I may, Madam President. If the board does not decide tonight to approve this motion, so that they can gather public input, feedback, comment, even on this, you know, preliminary changes, how far does that set us back with PSCOC, PSFA in terms of design phase funding?
It's just gonna depend because they're doing project awards in July, and the hope was to be able to get this in there for July. And you know, one of the things that we do know is cost of construction keeps going up and up and up. So you've got 2 things that you're facing. One, the state, as those costs go up, they have less money to fund projects. And 2, it's going to be more money out of your pocket for every dollar that cost per square foot comes up based on the district share. So time is money. I do want to let you know, of those 56 kids, we already know who they are. We can give those to you tomorrow if we needed to. When we put the data in and we extract it back out, we pull it out by zone, and all we have to do is sort it. We know exactly who those 56 kids are. And so we could share that data with you tomorrow if we needed to for that.
Mr. Vickers?
Just a follow-up, what about the Valencia Elementary block that's currently in the Ann Parish area? How
In-
many students is that?
In the
That
one
little
area?
tiny node,
A 0.
there's very few. There's very few.
Okay, because I mean, you might as well do both at the same time. You don't have to run a bus up there and then down. Right. To Valencia Elementary, that doesn't make any sense.
So I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you're looking at in terms of.
There's 2 little blocks that are currently in the Ann Parish area. The gray,
Oh, I see.
the gray one's the Valencia Elementary, and the light blue is the RGE. Both those blocks, you know, they should just,
There's about 30 to 40 kids in that area.
okay, so
And-
we're talking about a total of maybe 90 grand total between the 2 little areas. That just makes so much sense to not, to just include them in the first area.
Yeah, there's 73 students. Is that correct?
And are you, Member Vickers, are you talking about just doing that now and putting them
Yeah.
over because there's capacity?
What we were just talking about with RGE, yeah, same.
And then you would actually fix that zone with it right now. You could fix Ann
Yeah.
Parish straight out and you just reduce transportation for those 2 little areas right there.
Mrs. Otero, any questions?
No,
Any
do not have any
concerns?
questions.
Mr. Talon?
Yes, a couple questions. In your recommendations, you recommend that the Board of Education update its school student transfer procedures.
And I meant to mean the administration.
Okay, you say either way,
Mhm.
what recommendations would you do to improve those procedures? Namely, is it possible that the people transferring in be funneled to certain schools to help with numbers? Is that what?
Correct, is part of it. I mean, especially when you look at the high percentage of students that are coming in from Berlin. And you've got them hitting KGE at 41 students, 34 at RGE. You know, close to 30 or 24 over at Sundance. And so it's okay to accept them, but they need and welcome them in, but you want them to be funneled to schools that you actually have available capacity for them. And I do anticipate, I didn't mention it earlier, I apologize, is that Dennis Chavez Elementary is getting reconstructed. And one of the things is there is a large number of students that are within that Dennis Chavez boundary that will most likely return to their home school once that school's finished. Because they're gonna wanna go to the nice shiny. That's just kind of how that typically works. So, I do see, you know, within the next year or so, that number, especially coming from Dennis Chavez, may reduce some. I know some of them are employees of the district and stuff, but not the high quantity.
So you do see the over enrollment at Catherine Gallegos potentially being reduced, but in a year.
Within a year or so. It's gonna depend upon the staff they put at Dennis Chavez. So we all know how that kind of works as well.
Madam President, may I ask another question?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Colleen, when you teased out the data, when you and your team teased out the data, do you have the specific grade levels for the students who are in transfer? And did we give you enough information to tell us what grade level they came in as a transfer? So for example, did they come in last year as first graders and now they're second grade? Or are these all brand new in transfers this year?
We don't have that
Okay.
data because we typically don't get it because a lot of times districts don't collect it all. But I do have them all broken out. I know specifically what kids are coming from Berlin. I specifically know where they're coming from in Albuquerque. I specifically know all of those things because, you know, the addresses are provided. We locate them based on their student ID. So we don't have, you know, all the names all mixed up with everything, but we do know who they are. And so we can give that data. Right now, I set everything according to pre-K fifth, even though knowing fifth grade's moving up. So when we extract data out, we'll only give you pre-K 4 because those will be your next ones transitioning up for next year because fifth grade will be moving on to the middle school. So, but we calculate it with the fifth grade included so that we kind of know how well the school fills up. And your cohorts over time have been just a little, or fairly consistent, just a little off here, a little off there. So we know that when we examine that against the available capacity, you know, what we have.
Mr. Talley, did that answer your question? Do you have other
I do have.
follow through? Sure.
Expanding or moving the before after school programs either to other schools or from Catherine Gallegos. And expanding it, how would that affect the budget?
That I think is working with other community partners to come in and to help provide those programs, whether it's Boys and Girls Club, you know, sometimes the county like Bernalillo County does that for some schools up in Albuquerque. You know, there's other alternatives of reaching out to some of your community to find out who could be adequate and certified providers for those programs. And then they tend to do a lot of that cost. They may need your facility to use that after school, but on the other side of it, then they tend to charge the parents.
Okay, and I have one more question, but it's actually not for you. Can I just get Ms. Wolf to read the motion again that Mr. Vickers?
We may have to amend it.
That's where I was going.
Yep.
Attention on final geocoding students spring prior to the opening of.
Okay. I thought I heard something different, but that sounds what I, okay. That, Okay, I thought he had said something different, but that is actually.
So my turn. And I'm gonna follow on Mr. Talley's question. The existing before and after school care programs, those are not. So this could go to Dr. Kettler, this could go to you. Those do not belong to Los Lunas schools. Those are a third party that use our, that rent or lease our facilities. What is that?
I'm not 100% sure.
Ms. Montano, do you have a background on the after-school programs? With the exception of the most?
Yeah, President Osowski, members of the board. So we house Project Keys and we do, we have an MOU with them and we do have a minimal fee that we pay, but for the most part, it's funded through, I believe, CYFD. We help support like the EAs that work in there, but as far as the whole facility is, or the whole program itself, it is funded through CYFD. And I believe we just expanded to Valencia Elementary. I believe they just got a new program. And the goal is to continue that expansion in that partnership with them.
So we have the two site locations are KGE and Valencia Elementary.
We have Project Keys at Sanders Elementary as well.
Are those the two sites, Colleen, that you were referring to as Catherine Gallegos and Sundance? So Colleen, your recommendation then is essentially stop taking more students at Sundance and Catherine Gallegos. And you
Yes,
said
ma'am.
it nicely, right? But stop it and go to other places.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Does that help with clarity? It helps with my clarity.
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Kettler, do we have a plan or a consideration for the before after school programs other than what's at Sundance and Catherine Gallegos? I mean, I've heard about Valencia. Have we thought about where those also could go?
Madam President, members of the board, we have not had that discussion. But we will now have that discussion based on the recommendation from the report.
Are there any other questions?
Oh, Madam President, regarding the blocks that go to RGE and Valencia that are within the Ampere district or area now, can we go forward with this proposed boundaries and notify all those affected families and deal with those blocks next month? After they've been notified and given opportunity to give input.
So am I hearing you, Mr. Vickers, that you're saying that we first want to talk with those families before we pass this motion? And so that there would be a little bit more time?
Yeah, and I think regarding open meetings and all that, since that is not part of the noticed meeting,
That's fair.
it's not part of the recommendation that we don't want to be blindsiding people. Going to affect X number of families, and we should have a discussion with them.
I appreciate that concern. I think that's a fair concern.
Madam President, we will have Project Keys at 5 sites next year. Not that it changes anything in this discussion, but LLE, RGE, Valencia, Sundance, and KGE.
RGE?
RGE, correct.
Okay. So before we amend a motion or we take a vote on the motion, I'm wondering how the board members feel about Mr. Vickers' suggestion that we come back to the idea of moving the students from RGE that belong to Ann Parish and the students from Valencia Elementary that belong to Ann Parish that we have a conversation in the appropriate meetings before we take a motion. Because he is correct, our agenda does not say that we would make a decision on boundaries, just that we would approve the preliminary recommendation. We don't want a violation of an Open Meetings Act. We
Right.
would like to be, and plus we'd like to notify families appropriately. Could we live with that? Yes, we're making those decisions. We're having to push those decisions down a couple of months. But could we live with that?
So I guess we need to ask Dr. Kettler if that gives him enough time or the staff enough time to make those moves after that decision is made, right? I mean,
July.
is that enough time for you to have everything in order to start the following school year?
Member Tally, members of the board. It would be cutting it close, and I would be more concerned about the students who will be moving from an elementary school that they have made friends in a 2-week span. If I have my dates right, the board meeting in July will be about 2 weeks before kids go back to school. So we could do it. I'm more concerned about, I guess, the students, because I'll have to say goodbye to friends at their previous school and make new friends at the new school, but.
Could we hold that meeting sooner than July? I mean, we have June and we have another meeting in May.
We
Have
can,
a special
we-
meeting, right?
we
And
can-
I do agree. I mean, you don't want to do it, but it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. Eventually, these kids are gonna have to leave their friends they've known and move to another school. Either way, it's this year, 2 years, 3 years, but we've been kicking this can down the road for a while. So I think we need to make a move soon. And I do agree with Mr. Vickers, that's had that conversation, but I agree with Mr. Talley. I think we need to have maybe 1 or 2 more meetings to get this done, so there's appropriate enough time to make that happen.
I would recommend that we make that decision by June. That gives the district more time to get things in place. If we do it in July, it's not gonna give them enough time. Or we push till the following year to make the decision.
So, Madam Chair, I think, when we talk about agenda items for the next meeting,
Let's add that.
we'll just include that. But we do need to make sure that all those families are notified, and we'll probably have some kind of a workshop or something preliminary to talk about it. Find out what kind of input we're getting from them. They might say, oh, thank goodness, they're not gonna be bussed all that way anymore.
Or they could say, we're really enjoying the bus ride and
Right.
we would stay on that bus. That's correct. We just don't know. Any other comment, Mrs. Otero? No. So it does not appear to me that we would need to amend our motion. It appears to me that we are ready to take a vote. Okay, so the motion is to approve the elementary enrollment and boundary study addendum as was presented this evening. So I'm ready to call for the vote. Mr. Vickers,
Yes.
Mrs. Otero,
Yes.
Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
Mr. Tally,
Yes.
and I vote yes. You are released. Phew. Item F. Let me get to my page here. I apologize. That was a good discussion. Thank you, board members. We are now to item F. Presentation and discussion of the budget for the 24-25 fiscal year. Mrs. Sandy Trazik, Chief Financial Officer, will be giving us this presentation. And I'll turn this over to Dr. Kettler, please.
Madam President, members of the board, Ms. Trazik has been working on updating the presentation that she has previously given as cabinet has met several times to work on reducing the overall operational budget for next school year. And so I will let Ms. Trazik take us through the changes.
Madam President, members of the board. This is another presentation. I am a lot closer in numbers than any of the other previous presentations, so. here is the presentation overview that I plan to touch over, not necessarily in this order, but going over the proposed operational revenue, significant budget impacts, explanation of salary increases in medical insurance, explanation of excess expenses to revenue, cuts to cash reserve if revenue stays the same, and expenditures by function, discussing the cash reserves, and then finally the discussion of. Okay, as a review, our budget due date is May 29th. And our initial unit value has been set at $6,442.55, which is an increase of $288 from the current year's final unit value of $6,241.67. The estimated, this time I have still it's estimated, however, it's not in big, bold red. It's getting much closer. Estimated state equalization guarantee is $101,933,652, which is an increase of 1.9 million from the current year's final SEG. And this is with me not acknowledging the SEG that was for the most, because that portion of the revenue is being extracted out of operational and will have its own separate fund. Okay, here is a visual on a 10-year comparison of the student enrollment. And you can see the first 5 years, how it's been up, peak, started slightly down, but a huge decrease. And let's see, in the 21-22 school year. And then we saw a slight, we were seeing a slight increase since that time. And this year, for the first time since the increase, a slight decrease. And this slide is for the teacher cost index. So both of those last two, this slide and the one before it, are factors in the calculation of our SEG that I'll go over in detail later in this presentation. But this shows our teacher cost index at a 1.066, which is a little bit down. It's the same exact as it was the year before last. It is a calculation that comes from when we are looking at teachers' years of experience and the degrees that they hold. So that means, you know, perhaps when teachers retire and they might be replaced with maybe a newer, someone right out of school, that's going to bring down our TCI, which is going to be a factor in the calculation of our revenue. Okay, significant budget items. All salary positions and schedules are to receive at least a 3% salary increase. Medical insurance rate increase of 15.53%, which I'm estimating that to be $878,000 to the district. An increase in dental of 5%, which I calculate out at 41,000, and no change to vision. And these increases for the medical and dental will affect both the employee and the district at the same percentage. Property and liability insurance increase, approximately almost 29%. This only affects the district, and I have it estimated in my budget for $1 million. Then we have adding 4.25 FTE previously paid out of ESSER funds. And there is no change to the 3 mil, as I had said in the previous presentation. I was incorrect at that. 3 mil with its cash reserves will be able to sustain their normal flow for next budget year. So that would be for now. Should we not be able to pass the election, then that will be an addition to operational in the future. So this 4.2 FTE, 2.25 of it is transportation and 2 is in maintenance. Okay, I brought this up again, just in case you haven't seen it. This is the 3% raise versus the 15.53 increase in medical insurance. And it kind of shows that when it comes to someone who might be insuring their family, they are, the increase to medical insurance is going to eat up quite a bit of their raise. So it looks as though they're not, I remember years where there was no raises whatsoever and increases to medical insurance, and employees were making less the very next year because of that. This looks like even at the worst, they should be relatively the same at worst case scenario. Okay, this slide I kept it in because we have, sharpened our pencil, and we had some additional proposed budget changes, and all of those changes have been scratched out. They have all been removed from this budget. And we'll see why later. Okay, changes due to input. In our collective bargaining with the NEA, we were asked to increase our salary schedule to 35 years. The majority of them stopped at, for classified stopped at 28 and certified stopped at 30, just increased to 35. I did not find this, there's not very many people in that area, so it's not a huge budget impact, but is something worth noting. Also in collective bargaining, we combined the library and computer assistant salary schedules into one, which results in some assistants receiving greater than a 3% increase. And this is like the only place that employees would see greater than a 3%. We sent out during the earlier budget times, we surveyed out to the principals, discussing their allocations that they received. And, for the most part, we received the feedback that most of them were adequate. Actually received pretty good scores on our allocations. However, there was one in the nursing supplies that seemed like kind of a reoccurring request that one would be higher. So I did increase nursing supplies a little bit in this budget. Due to budget constraints, there were also some areas though that this year I did decrease some allocations to conserve the budget. Also, sick leave incentive is to be, we had discussed with NEA to offer it twice a year at $250 each semester instead of $250 annually. So not only did that expense double, I added a little bit extra just in case more people are now qualified for it. That was a request from NEA to change, and it seemed like, I know that it's been that way for at least the 17 years that I've been here, the same $215. It seemed like it was time to do something more. Okay, I know this is hard to read. So this is the estimated SEG, or 910B5. And I wanted to go through it and explain how these numbers come and what they mean and what direction they're going in. So you see the first part of it is talking about our student numbers. So what this is our average of our 80th and 120th day student numbers. And they are put in the different grades, pre-K, kindergarten, and then grade 1 through 12. All of those are an average of the 80th and 120th, which total for a total FTE MEM of 7,922 students. And if you look on the right, there is a column that says factor. So that factor means that some students, different grades, receive a different factor that's multiplied. So there is a heavier weight on some grades versus others. And then all those numbers get multiplied in total together. You can see I've put little blue arrows on the areas that have changed, where they are either going up or down. And this page, you can see all the numbers on here are headed down. So that means our student numbers went down. And then even after they're multiplied by the factor, that went down. So of course, then the total membership program units went down from one year to the next. The next section is the staffing cost multiplier. That is the previous page where I had the TCI showing that number. And then of course, we already saw that that number had gone down to 1.066. So when you take the fact that the student membership went down and multiply that by the TCI of the 1.66, you get an adjusted membership program units. So of course that went down. And that, if you compare it, if you look off to the very right, there is a number. Those are the program units, it went down compared to last year. And if you look in between that, you see $801,000. That is the dollar amount effect on that decrease.
From last year.
Correct. Yes, this is comparing last year at this time versus this time now. Next page. Then we go over the special education program units, and those units are also down. And that is, if you look at the right again, the negative down 40.45, and the dollar amount effect is $260,000 for that. There was no change in the bilingual program or the elementary fine arts program, and there was a teeny tiny little slight increase in the elementary PE program of a 0.18. Okay, the next section is at risk. So being our membership number of the 7,922 went down, it is multiplied with the at-risk index, which also went down slightly. Excuse me. From a 1.165 to a 1.63. When you multiply that, it has a decrease from last year of a 23.58 units, which then equates to $151,000 for that area. Then we have the National Board Certified Teachers. There are 6 of them. That is taken from last October's payroll. And that generated 9 units for this year, which is 4.5 units down. And I didn't even calculate how much that is. It's not really, I just kind of put out the numbers for the large increases and decreases. Then there are some slight amounts that for, excuse me, homeschool and homeschool activities and charter activities. And those numbers are very small, as you can see. And you can see all the directions of the arrows going up and down. The next area is in the program Tier 1 and Tier 2. So these are the amount of revenue that we're receiving, being we are over the 180 days. So this comes from the calendar calculation. And when I'm comparing, this one was really very, very difficult to compare, so I'm just comparing a portion of, just units that are on last year's. And those units, there is a, 5.01 decrease in tier 1 and a 0.668 or 3, I can't see them, from last year. Which, when you total up all the units differences, you get a 198.173 decrease in units in total. And if you multiply that by the 6,442.55 unit value, the program cost has gone down to $1.276 million. So that is one of the factors I'll show you later, and when I'm calculating the, all the things that affected the revenue this year. So with that, I am estimating that the state equalization guarantee is going to be $101,933,000.
That's our revenue from the state.
Correct, just for the, just. the
That
revenue
does
for
not
the
include
SCG.
Title I, Title II, Title III,
Mm.
IDEA B.
No, none of those ever hit, this is the operational fund. So when you think about the list of when I go through, all the revenues each month when we go
Mhm.
over the, all of those are all separate funds.
Correct.
And so, I don't have a lot of the numbers yet of the other funds, though the state hasn't, issued very many whatsoever. So as of 3:45, I think, there haven't been any added since the last time, I provided some of the numbers to you. Okay, so this is the calculation, what I have for operational revenue. And the first column is estimated. So this is how I'm estimating that I will be finishing out the current fiscal year that we're in by June 30th. Separated by the types of revenue that come into operations. And of course, you can see the SEG is the largest source of revenue in there. And the middle column is the proposed amount. And you can see that we had just gone through that whole SEG calculation, which totaled the 101,933. That's that number right there in the middle. In addition, we should, some of the other we receive some money with taxes. We receive money from indirect cost. At first, I was kind of thinking that those numbers would be smaller because I didn't know my indirect cost rate yet. And looks like, if funds are, you don't have the amounts of the funds yet. So I wasn't sure. So I was very conservative with those, but the indirect costs, one thing went right. The indirect cost rate did go up quite a bit for the next fiscal year. So with all that, I estimate that we will be bringing in $102 million, the yellow highlighted number there. The numbers below are the estimated cash. And for this meeting, I have not put the cash in the budget just so you can see exactly the amount that I believe we need for expense, ignoring the cash portion. I will put the cash in there before the next presentation. But this one, I'm trying to, I believe you wanted to kind of see where those differences were and how I was coming up with the negative cash. And then, of course, the other one is the variance, and you can see the changes. There is a big change when you look at the SEG NMOs. That's again is the portion that was coming in for the clubs that will no longer be in operational this year. Will be in a separate fund. Okay. This one, I just wanted to go over quick. I've already gone over it a couple of times, it kind of tells about the, 3 different years. The ELT, NMOS, all that has been handled in different ways to our revenue. Mostly this year, the difference from last year is pulling out the clubs. The only reason I did keep this slide again is because I know there's concern about the clubs, and we just found out today that there will be a separate fund for the clubs. I don't know the fund number, but we are to receive $1.6 million for the clubs. Previously, the clubs generated the 4.7 million revenue in the SEG. So important notes, I think it's important that I make you aware that this budget is achieved by cutting into the operational cash reserves based off of the estimated revenue that I have as of today. I haven't got a final 910B5. It actually though, I'll get 5 o'clock. I did get a call from my budget analyst, and he did said something, and it is agreeing to the amount that I have. However, it will still need to be reviewed, like the calendar and stuff by PED. And also kind of from your, there are some things that are in this budget that maybe we need to discuss and make sure it is the way you prefer it to be. We will continue to look for grants and other revenue sources for some expenses. However, if the revenue does not change, cash reserves would still remain high, but cutting into cash is just not sustainable for future budgets, unless, of course, things start changing where our membership goes up. But otherwise, if things stay the same, and if the revenue doesn't change, then we will be cutting into the cash. Plans to reduce expenses. All opening positions will be reviewed by the superintendent prior to hiring. And we will also be reviewing ways to increase student membership. Okay, the next one I have is kind of a summary, just kind of showing you some of the things that are happening that are causing, comparing last year to this year, causing the expenses to be higher. And of course, we already talked about the property liability insurance is cutting into it about $1 million. The 3% raises are about $3 million. And again, the medical and dental, the $878,000 and the $41,000 for dental. And then we went through that calculation for SEG, and that was 1.2 million down, reduction from last year. And that was mainly due to the student enrollment decline, the at-risk multiplier, and less special ed program units. Then also some of the agreements that we made and losses of ESSER funds. We had, because we will no longer be able to charge ESSER funds indirect costs, which is revenue to operational. With this year, ESSER 3 was at $12 million. Looking at, and we had a few other ESSER special ed funds in there. We're looking at not being able to take advantage of about $300,000 in revenue. Moving some of the FTEs, I had some FTEs coded for transportation in the ESSER funds. And so I will no longer be able to do that. And because of that, bringing those back, it's really in the transportation, but being transportation always goes in the negative. I will have to pick up all the excess costs that they have. So the greater that their negative is, it's
And that's an
ultimately just
operational.
Yes, it is a separate fund.
But it's-
However, it's always, we never receive enough money for the amount that it cost us.
Okay.
So because of that, anything adding to transportation is adding to operation. We also are moving 2 positions from the ESER 3 to in maintenance, and that's calculated at $164,000. And just some random, the sick leave, I might have over on that, but I put in, the difference of that is like $51,000. And then another, when I'm comparing, when I'm looking at this fiscal year, there are several open vacants, positions. And with that, I did put in the budget for if they are filled, which, if the vacant positions add up to like $3.6 million, if you assume that the person was there for, say, half the year, that comes to about 2.3 if you include the benefits. And then I put in a 6% increase to utilities. Not that I know that there's going to be a 6% increase to utilities, but that's just kind of common every year practice that we do for safety, because it's not like you can just turn off the lights. So that 6% calculates out to 168,000. Then there is a section for the new organizational chart. And the only 2 items that from that organizational chart that are in here is one for the director of personnel, bringing back that position. And then the other is combining academics and special services. I believe is going to cost $0.25 of an FTE for a cabinet member, and so I estimate that at $50,000. And then the clubs being in the operational this year, since we received the revenue, but the participation wasn't that high, just due to the nature of the demands that they had on that. We did make sure that we did everything that the program said we needed to do to receive that revenue. However, our expenses were really low, so we actually made a decent amount of money on that particular club portion into our revenue, and we will no longer have that. So kind of all those total about $13 million differences from one year to the next. There's more little small things here and there, but those are kind of the majority of the larger items. So the next one, I have an estimate for the reduction of cash. And what I just did was kind of cut out what I had earlier for the proposed revenue, which was totaling the 102 million. And then you'll see later, I proposed the expense at 110 million. And so the last column there is the reduction. So what that's showing is, normally we are trying to make sure that we do not spend more than what we bring in. But this budget has been challenging, and it looks as though the required amount that I need for this budget is 110 million, and revenue is only at 102. Now, these are in some places, me being conservative, where I put that position in, if it was vacant and it might be filled, so the budget is in there for it. However, the likelihood of all positions being filled is very unlikely. So I'm sure that we may not make it all the way up to 110,000, but then I'm sure also there's going to be things that happen that weren't budgeted for, things that happen. And so, this is where I propose the budget would be at. And so that kind of shows you just the calculation for how I come up with how I believe we're gonna cut into cash with this budget. Okay, the next one is the cash reserves, kind of showing where we're at, starting with, last year's audited cash amount of the 21 million. And last year's, revenue. And then, if you look at the amount of the revenue, so I put on here 20% of the total revenue. And it's just kind of a guideline. I've never been told you need to keep it at 20%. I have, heard that perhaps you don't want to go over the 20% because the state could sweep your funds. And it looks as though, they gave you money that you didn't need, and so I, hope to keep it within that range. So, but it is not mandated. I believe for the bond, when we had spoke with some of the bond advisors, and they were saying you should at least try and have 10%, and back then when they, when we first heard it, that seemed like such a huge amount to try and, get to. But 20% is, a very comfortable amount. I really enjoy the 20%.
Is that 20% of the total
Of
budget?
that, it's,
But where do we
it's
get
the total.
20% of what?
I put it of the total revenue here. Whether
Okay.
it's the SEG or the total revenue, I put total.
Okay, oh, okay,
It's
thank you.
not like anyone's ever said you should have it at this or 20% of your revenue. So I picked total, the SEG is the main component of that number anyway, so it's not like, it's much different. So, if I show you, it looks like this last year, we were over just a little bit, the 569,000. And then, excuse me, for this next budget, I am anticipating, that our cash will, grow to the 25 million is my estimate in this budget. And with my 102 in revenue, 20% would be the 20 million. So we are almost 5 million over, kind of like that nice sweet spot. And then if you take the estimated 25 million, and if the calculated amount for what I'm showing might cut into the reserves, that would leave us with a reserve balance of the 17,500,000. Which, if you compare under the 20, you're 3 million underneath the 20%. Next, I was gonna go over the expenses. Just said these are just the expenses. What I believe we need to have in the budget to process this budget. It does not include any of the cash. And this is just kind of a visual, just to kind of show you the different functions where they're putting, and of course, the direct instruction is the largest area there. But the next slide kind of shows you, you can see the actual dollar amounts and the percentages. And they are by the different functions, and then the descriptions of what those functions mean are off to the side of that. And then when you can see all that totals up to the 110 that I had mentioned earlier. I thought it would be best to note that some in order to, looking at what we can do for this budget, there was some things added for revenue. in this budget, when you're looking at my revenue numbers, the current budget includes 8 remote half days added to the student calendar. And that increases the revenue approximately $1.6 million. And that would be happening on the teachers' professional development days. This revenue is already in my calculations, and so if that chose not to be done, you would have to reduce the 1.6 from what I show already cut into cash. Also, the last day of school is a full day instead of a half. This added $500,000 to the revenue. So those are just some things I wanted to kind of point out what's in the budget and what's not in the numbers that you see in front of you. Okay. I'm sure you have questions.
Mr. Vickers. Why did I start with you? Is that why you shook your head, Mr. Vickers?
Okay, well, I've got a few questions. You go to the page about the comparison, the student enrollment on the 10-year basis.
Mhm.
So what is the comparison of the teachers or staff numbers against that same chart? Are they reduced
Are they reduced?
through attrition or whatever, or?
Are
For the
you
most
asking
part,
how
the-
many
the
staff
teacher-
how many teachers were in 2015, for instance, compared to how many teachers are in 23, 24? Is that what you're asking?
Right.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
So teachers do go down as student numbers go down. Sometimes it's not possible, sometimes it is. Actually looking at the numbers, would be kind of difficult. Going back to that time, some of the FTEs were a little funny when we first went to Visions, and sometimes it's hard, like, to look at it, and it would be hard to kind of find those numbers, just because we kind of learned how Visions works with FTEs and stuff we did back then. But the FTEs for like teachers fluctuate, so.
Right.
Based on student numbers.
So, let's see. So on your significant budget items page, there were certain salaries that were paid for through different federal funds and didn't come out of operational. And due to changes in positions and assignments, that more of those are paid out of operational now. How much money does that amount to?
The transportation, let's see. Transportation was about $78,000. And the two maintenance are about $164,000.
Okay, and any other positions in directors or any of those that change the mix of federal funds versus operational?
No, none of the, other than none of the ESSER funds paid for any of those type of directors. We had a director that was paid in ESSERs, that is one of the maintenance persons that has been moved to operation.
But besides ESSER, like Title I, any of those?
No, the only difference is when the changing of the federal funds is on the organizational chart. It looks as I believe a quarter of an FTE would be moved into operations. So that's not because of ESSERS or any other change in that, that's a change in the structure
That's what-
from the organizational chart, but no.
That only amounts
those-
to
But that's a quarter of an
Yeah.
MTE at a cabinet level. Is that correct?
50,000.
50,000, yeah, and that's, that is in that one list, kind of, everything out. Now, you know, they're in that, also in that list, it talks about vacant positions that have changed and, like, you know, this current fiscal year, you know, we've been without, the cabinet member, instead we had an interim, and so, we've, you know, we'll have, this budget has that in the budget for that cabinet member being replaced.
Okay. In your page on changes due to NEA want to extend the salary schedule up to 35 years. So there's a certain increase year by year for teachers, an X amount with years of service.
Correct. They're not very big, steps or changes, but, we did continue that on. So it really is not very, very large at all, being that there's just a handful of people and it's also not a huge increase, so. It was more so because of the fact that, now when people are being hired, you have to work more years in the system to get retirement and stuff, so. It was asked if we could also reflect that on the salary schedules.
Okay, so if we're extending that out, does that also affect the TCI number? Does that increase that number? Yeah.
If it keeps someone working, cause they're making a little bit more and not upset that, you know, like, I'm stuck at this, you know, row, I'm no longer gonna ever progress. If it keeps them, it'll increase the TCI,
So that should offset it.
hopefully,
Theoretically. Okay.
hopefully it helps.
Let's see, what else do I have? I think I answered this one question, but, so what about retirement? We were at the gala Friday night and there was 27 teachers, 27 staff retiring. What are we doing regarding those positions? Are we going to freeze that and not fill those if at all possible, or what is the plan?
Member Vickers, members of the board, that was in the presentation on one of the slides, that those positions that have not been filled will be evaluated for their necessity before they are filled moving forward. Does that answer your question?
Sort of, will those be brought before us considering they affect the budget?
Those would be personnel decisions. So I'm not sure that, I guess if you're saying you're not going, you want to cut 3 million out of the budget, then that would be the board's prerogative or right. And then I would need to work within that to make the personnel numbers work, I guess, to meet the budget.
Yeah, I think that's important since we are responsible for the budget.
That's correct.
That's a big factor there for sure.
Mr. Vickers, can I just piggyback off of that question? Were those positions accounted for in the budget already, so as if it was fully staffed?
The total was 3.6 million in vacancies, but Ms. Trazik only figured 2.6
If I'm comparing,
million, 3
I
million.
just, you know, take the whole 3.6 as if those persons, they were gone the whole entire year. I didn't go to see, you know, was this person here for the half year, full year? I just took half year average for everyone. When I'm comparing the number, comparing last year to this, or current year that we're in, the next year's budget. I budgeted for them. Whether they're gonna be filled or not, it's kind of worst case scenario. So I put it in there just in case, because I don't wanna put it in there, especially the teachers, because the teachers are gonna have to be there based on the student numbers, so.
Well, so that's about 3.6 million if we didn't fill those positions. That what I'm hearing?
I think it was two.
And then,
It was 2 point, because we were making the assumption of, have some people that wouldn't be employed on day one of the school year, that it would take a longer period of time to get people employed. And so some people would not be paid for an entire year. It'd be a half year, et cetera. So the number was 2 point. I can't remember what page it's on. It was 2.7 or 8, something like that.
It's 2.3.
2.3, thank you.
okay, so,
That's a really rough number, and,
Right.
and
Right.
it's
And-
in there as a.
Placeholder.
So, hopefully that would be savings when we are reviewing whether it's something we need or not. But like I said, if it's a teacher's, if it was a teacher's salary, then it's gonna be based on what they need in the classroom. And, but we may have to have that position. There might be some positions that would have to be filled.
yeah, my point earlier was if we've gotten a reduction in students, then it might be that we can reduce teachers through retirements or attrition,
Christian.
to match that, right? Because losing the students, we lose revenue, so we have to deal with that on the other side.
Incredible.
Okay. Okay, I'm done. I'll let somebody else about it.
Mr. Bennett?
So what we're basically saying, we're looking about taking 8 million out of our reserve fund to make the budget this year. And that's not counting yet the 3 mil that may not pass that we might additionally do from, October, November?
Right, so, this year, so actually with ESSER funds, we have been purchasing quite a few things, and, we have been careful with our 3 mil. And, we have enough in cash reserves that they can still go even if this doesn't pass.
Right,
For just a year.
it'll still go, but it'll be an added expense to coming out of the
It
reserve,
would
right,
be This year,
but next
but
year.
next year.
Yeah, see, that's my concern. If we, tapping 8 this year, we gotta tap another 8 next year, probably be more. I mean, how long is the reserve gonna, sustain before we end up where we were many years ago, where we do have to where we do have to reduce days of employment and go years without any pay raises? That's my biggest concern. And that's why I think we need to maybe have a different option brought to us, where it's not as extreme as 8 mil, in my opinion.
Well, the other option is cutting employees. I cannot do that with supplies. The only supply that would be a large supply that we could cut would be, to not provide the classroom supplies and then go back to asking the parents to provide those classroom supplies. So that's even if the unit value does not increase in January, we could review the, where we're at that time and decide, because for the budget that we're doing now, I'm buying the classroom supplies now out of the money, out of this year's. I'm buying them a year in advance, so the supplies are there ahead of time. For one, and I'm taking from the cash now, instead of taking it out of next year's budget. So next year, towards the end of the year, I can look at how, how healthy our balance is and see. We may have to then let parents know, we can no longer do that. That is the only large expense. The supply allocations that we give the school sites is not a lot.
It's
And,
not-
what is sort of our expense on vehicles that are used throughout the district? Good example, the SROs, taking them home, the cost of the insurance, the fuel. Instead of just having them leave them parked at, the two east and west side locations, how much could that save us?
And that is something we already did discuss quite a bit, and I actually did reduce the gas supply allocation in there because we had discussed perhaps making it to where only like directors, people that are on like on call would be the ones that would take
And-
them home.
And I
And
guess
so
one
that
more
should
question,
save-
going back to the boundaries. If we did cut back to where some of that bus use and moving some of the kids and just say by chance even shutting down RG, what kind of money would that save the district a month? Versus, the constant repairs to keep it running.
Kind of some of the fixed, like say personnel, like, cause then that person could go and work. at-
Yeah, we could keep them
Yeah.
employed. I agree.
Kind of rough estimate was I kind of looked at about $1 million a year. And then that's not considering at all I don't know the transportation that it takes
Right.
from Ann Parish to our.
Or People doing stuff.
That is not in
That's
this,
my big thing.
this budget at all. That is in the bond, so, so all the repairs that, large building repairs, that comes out of the bond fund. And so,
Bond, have to become out of.
but we'll have
Reserve
that
or
for several
operating.
years still, so.
We hope. We hope.
Yeah.
We will. We need to, because then that,
That's okay.
that's years off, but.
No, you're fine.
Yes.
Do you have other questions? Mr. Talley?
President, can I?
Yes,
respond?
absolutely, absolutely.
Mr. Vickers, attrition is the preferred method for reducing staffing numbers. We talked about this last week in cabinet. In 2010, when there were 91 employees at Rift, that saved $3 million. So I don't know what the inflation would be now, but in 2010 terms, to get to like $9 million savings, we'd have to rift 273 or cut 273 positions. So I would much prefer, and I know all of you would much prefer to not fill positions, move people around where we need them. And then as we get into next year and we have more attrition, make those cuts also at that time.
That concludes your comments, Dr. Kelly.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Talley?
Yeah, so I've got a bunch of questions some for clarification and other things. In this final budget, are you including the passage of the 3 mil, or is that not calculated? I just want that clarified.
You know what, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention on some of there is increased cost in here for like postage and elections and advertising. And so whether it comes out of, some of it this year, which would reduce, my cash or add to my cash, but I don't do it this year, next year. So either way, there are larger expenses in operational than I typically have in the advertising, postage and bond elections, so.
Some of these positions covered by previously.
Yes,
been
3 mil will be able to continue as is for next,
Have you,
fiscal
you
year.
to the budget that is gonna pass, is that your assumption, or are you?
No, they have enough. They have enough funds, so what we usually do on some of our funds, that are never a guarantee. We try to always make sure that there's enough reserve that you would have it for a year to be able to prepare and make changes, so. they would be- It will not, it's not. It's not going to, well, for one, we have a few months that we'll be able to we're still getting revenue into the next fiscal year. If it passes, and that's great, then we'll hope that have the money that we need for the next fiscal year. It's not affecting this operational budget next. This this, 24-25 school year. If it doesn't pass, then yeah, this next year is probably gonna look just as bad, if not worse.
Added revenue page at the very, very end. His current budget figures include 8 remote half days added to the student calendar. So is that a change then to our proposed, our already adopted calendar?
Yes.
Okay, so that's something that we need to remember. We've already adopted a calendar for the next year. And these remote half days, is that like all learner days? Is that?
It's like the all learner days, but it's not a full day. It is, a half a day where, they receive a project.
So your budget includes the board hopefully approving a calendar that would include all learner remote days?
Correct. And so that's the choice, and that's why I put that number in there for you to decide what's most important to you. If you're totally against, those 8 remote days, then, it's another 1.6 cut to the.
All kids that actually did remote learning on those days because it wasn't required. And I know some students did, and good to them. My sons probably would have done better if they would have taken the initiative to do those. But the reality is it's basically getting money for nothing in my estimation. So that's just something that I think we would have to discuss, obviously. That would definitely take a new calendar and a new approval.
Right, and I needed to point that out to you, because that's choice on here. And so,
So if we didn't do that, though, that'd be another 1.6 million in the hole, according to your budget.
correct,
Okay.
right. I know. Cut into it, so we put options, try to figure something out. It's been a struggle to see what we can do, and it was an idea, big money idea, and so.
I know you're looking there. You can
I
to help us, and I
we
appreciate
did,
that.
so that is a choice, and so I wanna make sure you're aware of the fact that choice. How much, what's more important to you?
Then you talk also about the unit value perhaps increasing in January. How often has that changed? What's the likelihood of that actually changing?
Actually, it goes up more frequently than not.
Okay.
When I took out the slide of the history of the unit value.
So a lot of this depends on grants that you and others have been working on getting, correct? And some of those have started to come in. What's the status of those grants and the likelihood of all of those coming in to support this?
Oh, I believe they'll come in. I think they're gonna be last minute, and we'll have to, we have until May 29th to get them posted in the system. Well, not really, that's when they all have to be in there, but many of the federal programs, they will close them off earlier. So, but.
But this budget.
We do have some time, but a lot of times they give it to you last minute, so you better be prepared.
So if those grants don't. Situation.
Like the Title I, Title II, I'm sure will be coming in. If not, I'm sure we would have been ahead of time that something's gonna. Those are guaranteed. They might be less than what we've seen in the past. And so even, I think I kind of provided a spreadsheet of some things we know, and might have been one that we did know. And they're really hard unless you know the whole situation, because sometimes, when you're looking at the award that we know about now, the prior year would have had a finalized amount and carryover from the year before that might have been higher. Title I, that at that point, we had a waiver because, we had, a lot, we have to spend at least 85% of that, and we didn't last year because of the whole changeover, not having, people in that area, the directors over it. And so, so that number was higher and it's been put lower, so, really hard to tell on that, but.
All right, I have one more question, and first of all, thank you for standing up there and taking these questions. I know they're not easy from all of us, and we appreciate, the time that you've spent putting this budget together. I know you've spent countless hours doing it, and we definitely appreciate that. I'm new to school board and a lot of school associated things. So this is more for clarification and interest. What happens, and anyone who knows can answer this, what happens if we don't approve the budget by May 29th? I'm just asking because, it's,
I'm sure I would really upset the PED, and, sometimes on some of the funds, if they're not, done on time and stuff, you run the risk of not having them. It can be a problem, but,
so there's a sense of urgency also that this is approved.
I've never seen it not approved on time. Typically would, do whatever it takes to get it done on time. And so we even have a late budget due date, so sometimes some of these things just cause ripple effects and everything, and not having funds in there on time, they're cut off, and then they don't, and I'm talking about other federal funds on that part. I don't know what would happen if you didn't have, I've seen that problem happen with a federal fund and not being able to spend that money, and then, oh, wow, we have somebody, salaries coded there, and you can't use it because now you need to be an audit finding, and then you'd have to go to do a bar, and then you do a bar, and it's the planning award, and then planning awards are only for budget, but now you're in the it's just have it. So I'm not sure what would happen with operational.
Thank you.
Especially since it is a late date.
Mr. Sandy, the 29th at 8 AM is the submission that you have to make, correct? So how many days ahead of that would we need an approval or an approved budget because of the massive amount of uploads you have to make?
Now that every line, there's, regular ed teacher, kindergarten teacher, special ed teacher, vocational teacher, all the different codes for the teachers and all the different benefits, like the, medical, all of the different programs. There are millions of lines to be uploaded. And the biggest one, of course, is our operational. And it's, I can't wait till the last minute because there's going to be accounts that just don't upload, and it's huge upload, and it will take me probably a couple days to just do that, and it will keep me from being able to upload the federal funds unless I want to do if I upload my federal funds, then I would have to hand key my operational, which are millions of lines, and so please don't.
So question was really around urgency, and we need to work collectively so we can get it approved at the May 21st meeting. That is the goal, so you have plenty of time, correct? Yes. Okay. Thank you, Sandy.
Mrs. Otero.
With the insurance rate increases, the medical, dental, and property liability rate increases, have other insurance companies been looked into that might be good quality but more cost efficient?
I have not looked into it, but it's just been, something that like, I don't even know what our options are, to be honest with you. I don't know, like, I know that every district other than APS uses NIPSIA. And so I don't know, never investigated what our options are for that, and
But there
Now
are other
it's-
options.
I don't know. I don't know if we're obligated to. I haven't looked into it, and it's not something I was able to do now, because I've been trying to, what can I do to not have it?
Mrs.
Such a
Otero,
big
are you
cut.
talking about the property liability insurance? We're speaking
And-
about medical.
Both.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, Mrs. Tracy, but the property liability insurance, that is NIPSIA. And we are one of many districts that have bought in to that particular property liability insurance fund, correct? The only district in the state of New Mexico that is not part of NIPSIA is APS. Is that correct? So.
What I, as far as I'm aware, I believe that's.
Right. So I remember when APS moved away from NIPSIA, that was 3 years to find a property liability. The property liability covers us when we are sued. So given that this was a surprise increase, this is only from prior experience and knowledge, but I'm not sure we could find something. Today is what day? What is today? Today is the
May 7th.
7th,
May 7th.
due the 21st at 8 AM. I'm not sure that we have time. I think it's a great idea maybe for the long term. But it was a bear for Albuquerque with the budget that they have to find an underwriter.
I am talking about long-term, sorry.
Oh, no, no, okay.
It's something right now. Yeah, this is that, yeah. It was just
No, that's great.
okay, that's it. Thank you.
Ready? Hold up. You get to stay later with the president. The guy won't do it.
That was this joke.
We'll see about that. Okay, first of all. We lost a lot of teachers between COVID and now, so our TCI has impacted us over time. I mean, the drop in TCI, then our experience level with our cadre. Correct?
Correct.
And although we celebrated many retirees on Friday night, it was like, please don't go for so many reasons, correct?
Well,
So we
Yeah,
really
yeah,
have to
they'll
work
come
to
back.
retain teachers. So my point with that is, I heard the comment that when we lose students, we usually lose teachers. In my opinion, the last thing I want to see is a teacher lost. We have a 30% on average proficiency rate across this district. What helps proficiency are teachers. So in my mind, I am not open to a budget where we consider any cost to a classroom. That's my opinion. So that's the first thing.
I'm sorry, that was,
No, it's not.
it
I'm not.
would be a matter of like, if, when the teacher does retire, and if you don't have the student numbers for them, then that may be a class that you would have less. So they kind of, this school may have the need, this school doesn't. Andrew would speak better to this than I would, but I'm just saying they are ones that do kind of ebb and flow, where like my position, you have one of me and I'm gonna be here. And you're not gonna like, oh, this year, we had, 12 million in ESSER funds this year. We're gonna hire another person. We take it and so we do not go up and down with the way teachers do.
So I agree, and I think, being a former high school administrator, that sometimes there are singleton classes that we have let go. And I'm not talking just about here, statewide, probably nationwide, of 8 students, because we want to try and build a program or start a class. Those are the difficult choices that will have to be made in not allowing those classes to make. We still have that teacher, but they're shifted into a core area class with 25 students.
Excellent point. Not the point I was making.
Okay. Can
The
you please
point I'm
clarify?
making is I hear teachers,
Yes.
your program for students. I don't hear cuts anywhere else across this district. We don't have a choral program. We're a large school district and we don't have a choral program. We are a large school district and we have student ratios that are unbelievable in some classes. And yet I hear we're going to work about program offered to students. That to me, my personal opinion, is unacceptable. We're here for kids, and if our vision statement is students first or every moment matters, then we put our money where our mouth is, in my opinion. So that was number 1. Flipping on, changes due to input. There's a comment in here about increasing nursing supply allocations, but due to budget constraints, some area supply allocations were reduced. So what does that mean? Did we increase nurses? Did we not increase nurses?
Not, not nurses, nursing supplies. So
Nursing
every-
supplies.
So every,
Okay,
some supply allocation, so we'll give out, to all school sites based on their student numbers. They will receive classroom supplies, library supply, nursing supply money.
okay.
And I, kind of heard from several principals that they needed something more for nursing supplies. A lot of the other ones were, I'm fine with this, and so it was just kind of looked at, like, do they need this much every year on a budget cut? A lot of times when budgets were, in the old days when they were really bad, we would just 25% off of everything. And that's what sometimes they were done on supplies. But as it is, like the schools are not receiving a lot in those allocations.
Okay.
So I tried to look in places that they may have been generous and reducing maybe some of those. But nursing supplies was something I thought, I don't want to cause legal costs because I'm providing enough nursing supplies.
Sure. Thank you for that clarification.
Mhm.
I didn't see anything in here about travel. We've been a travel happy district for about the last 4 years. One of the things I would think that we could cut down on, and this would be the first with the board, we stop out of state travel across the board. That's a lot of money. And don't get me wrong, the staff here have made sure we are well accommodated for when we travel. But in my opinion, students first. And I don't know how my board members feel, my colleagues, but I haven't seen what we spend on travel at all levels. And I think that's a huge expense that we could start talking about and not have that. So now, thinking about those things, I've been running a few numbers over here, and I would like to see how my colleagues feel about this. I do want to make a comment about the All Learner Days. When campaigning for this position, there are joys and then there are not so many fun times. One of the things that are not fun are the All Learner Days. If you want to be eviscerated quickly, if you do not, if you're feeling really good about your life and you want to feel really bad about your life, talk to a parent about an All Learner Day. Okay? I don't know how we can even consider that. First of all, we hear, I don't know what Mr. Talley heard or Mrs. Otero heard during their campaigns, but I heard waste of time, non-instructional, nothing of value. It was a way to make money off of our kids. That's a quote. A way to make money off of our kids at the expense of quality instruction, at the expenses of a teacher being in front of a group of kids. we have a 30% on average proficiency rate. I don't know if anybody is hearing my sense of urgency, but 30% proficiency across all grades. We have to start having serious conversations. We have to, in my opinion. So, is there any way that you can throw up an Excel spreadsheet? I want everybody to join in my fun. Can you throw one up and then I'll holler out some numbers for you? Yeah. Thank you. So first of all, I want to piggyback after one of the things that Mr. Bennett said, pulling 7.98 million from cash reserves is 31.3% in 1 year. 31.3%. That's untenable. We cannot continue to do that. So if you want to make that screen just a little bit larger, please. And if you take from the estimated reduction of class, this is of cash on slide 18. And if you would please type in 7985594. That is the estimation of reduction in cash if we pass this budget, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then if you go over to slide 19. And your best and professional estimation, which I trust, is to have 20% of our total budget as a cash reserve, correct? Is that what you were saying to us?
I tried to.
Okay,
keep 20.
but that's your professional best judgment for us as the board.
Yes, I believe that 20% is the amount that, what I hear is kind of the danger, anything over that is the danger zone. That could be sweet.
Okay, so the difference between what you estimate we have, don't type this number in, is 25,505,228, 25 million. But 20% of our estimated budget would be 20,545,230. So maybe a little play area, type this number in please on cell A2, 4,959,998. $4,959,000. No, sorry. I don't know how to do math tonight. $4,959,998. The difference there, if I am correct, between 7 million, cell A1, and cell A2, did I lose you on the?
Yeah.
4,959,998. The difference between A1, subtract A2 from A1. Go to cell A3. Equal sign. A1 minus. We are $3 million that we have to find if the board would allow you to play with that 4.9 million. Is everybody following what I'm saying? So then when I look at that 3.9 million and I think about 1.619 million, so in cell A4, please write 1,619,400 and add cell A3 to cell A4.
Yeah,
Please add A3 plus A4.
3 and 4.
That brings us to needing to find 4.644 million. If we allowed that little bit of discretionary off of the cash reserve. And if we think about travel, which we don't know what that total is. And if we think about possibly some transportation costs, we don't know what that number is. But if we come back on slide 17, the summary of expenses, changes contributing to the cuts in reserves, and we immediately look at those vacant positions. Please subtract 3.6 million. from the A5. No, I'm sorry. So in A6, please write $3,600,000. In A7, please subtract A6 from A5. So A5 minus A6. Right now, without having time to think about it, I would see that we would need to reduce this budget by $1,044,996. And I could live with it. We are freezing positions. We are taking out travel. And we give you a little bit of playroom from the cash that you said would be over from your best professional estimate. That's my initial thought. Mr. Vickers,
3,600 on line 6, and these 3,600,000 is freezing the vacant positions. So
Yes.
you're
there will be
Yes,
no additional hires.
And when you say,
Eh,
because the majority of that is teachers.
Is it?
So, so theoretically, if we did that, and the superintendent determined he absolutely had to fill a position, then he would bring a bar to us to adjust. Is that correct? Somehow an adjustment for our approval? Is that how that would work?
If it would change the budget, then we would bring the bar to you, so.
I'm just saying, yeah, we do that and find that we need to add money to salaries, positions, then that would simply be a request, a budget adjustment request.
Based off of what? Because I do budget adjustments if I mean, it would have to be either moving it, taking away from somewhere else. Or I would, to increase my revenue. After this point, I would need to have a reason. Because I've finished my audit, so now I'm going to, my cash I have more cash, so I'll be able to book that. Or, the final unit value has changed, I can't just like, oh, I was wrong, I need more money, so I'm just gonna do a bar asking for more money.
Out of cash reserve.
Cash reserve, so my cash reserve, my cash reserves are gonna be based off of, my audited cash starting. Plus the revenue that I'm receiving now, minus the expense I plan to spend out.
Mhm.
Then I will get an estimate, it's the cash, and that flows over into the next year. So I have to, then I add my revenue plus my estimated cash, and that will be the amount that I will show as revenue, plus, will be the amount that I show as expense. My expenses and my revenues have to equal, or it will not be accepted in the system.
Okay, well, assuming the budget is approved by the state and later it's determined that you need to hire somebody and there's not enough money in that budget line, then can you request a transfer from cash reserves to cover that expense?
Cash reserves, I would have to show where I want to move expense. My cash reserves are gonna be the amount that I calculate. So my cash and my revenue become my total revenue that I have, and that will become the amount of expense that I will show on the budget.
Okay, I understand that, but assuming it's all approved and we're into August or September, it's determined you need to add a position, what would you do?
It's not there in the budget, then I would do a bargain. I would have to say, I'm gonna take from this place and move it here.
So I would take it from supplies, maybe. I mean, just for instance, I think that's what Mr. Vickers is
Right.
asking.
Right.
Where would we carve that money out of? And you're saying one of the
Where,
5,000 fund numbers, is that correct? Am I getting the language right here?
yes,
Am I
it
trying?
would be, I would have to pick what fund I want to take it from. So in this budget, the only way I could do that is I would have to reduce my people to make it. So I would have to get rid of employees, and then I would say, oh, I have that money now here, and I could, now that I got rid of, you know, this person, I can hire that person. So I would move. But I would have to get rid of someone to do that.
So at what point do you dig into cash reserves?
When my revenue is less than my expense, then I dig into reserves.
Okay, so say near the end of the next
Oh,
fiscal year, for instance.
It would be, so I'd be watching it every year.
Okay.
I would be keeping, just like now, when we, you know, you look at that, I'm showing you kind of where we're at in the budget, and, you know, like, operational still has like $28 million. So I'm watching the amount that I have left, and knowing that, I know that I still have to cover transportation. So that's how I'm getting that 25 million that I have. I'm anticipating what I'm gonna spend out till June 30th, and I'm anticipating what I'm gonna have to cover elsewhere, and then what's left. So during the year, you know, this is gonna be a year I'm gonna have to really, really babysit everything that's going on. And, you know, I do have a list of things that I believe we can do. We've already discussed things like travel and, the vehicles. Right now, it's like people are going to have to stay within their budget. In some ways, that's easy when it comes to, you know, entering a purchase order. I can see that it's over budget, you know, I can reject it. Places I'm gonna have trouble is in like the travel. Say the football team's gonna go somewhere and they're gonna have that trip, and then the bill comes in way more expensive. So those type of expenses are gonna be hard to control. But the ones that I can control, it's gonna be, you have to stay within your budget, all departments, all school sites. So, because, you know, I have these budgeted numbers, I don't have excess.
From what I know of student travel, it's usually because we have coaches who like to take more students than are budgeted. And it's unfortunate, but if we're all cutting back, then we're gonna have to stay. And the language is gonna have to be, you stay in your budget, and it's not optional. So please don't surprise us, because that would be a violation. I mean, we're gonna have to just get a little tough here. I don't know how else to say this to anybody, but I don't know how anybody else operates a checkbook, but I cannot take 31% of my savings account this year and then hope to just keep doing that at 31%. It's not reasonable, it's not doable, it's not feasible, it's not sound, in my opinion. That's how I feel about that. I feel pretty strong about that. Tell me about the number of teachers in the 3.6 million. How many of that are positions that we did not fill across the year? Do you know? Would Mr. Size know? So let me see if I can rephrase my question, because maybe I really wasn't clear. In that 3.6 million, for the positions that are unfilled, for the vacancies, is that accumulation of those positions over time? Yes, of course it is. Are those positions absolutely necessary for classrooms? How many of those positions are absolutely necessary to meet student instructional need? Have we gone without them up to this point in time? Right, sure. Right. No, right. Right. So that 3.6 million has been without a certified teacher in those classrooms, but with a substitute teacher. Is that what I'm understanding?
Service. That's interesting.
And that's why I took just half of that, because it could be just someone that just retired and that position's now open. I mean, these are, it may not be one that was open all year, it could be one that was open all year. We, I know that, Carlos works very closely with Andrew, and they looked at the list on, you know, what. I tried to get the list of the people that we actually think we need in there, and is there, you know, sometimes a vacant could be, you know, that school used to have a lot more student numbers than that, you know, teacher. And maybe now those student numbers are now, you know, that was elementary, now they're in middle school, and that numbers, and that amount is still open, you know, vacancy is still open. Maybe that's not really a true vacancy. Maybe that's not one that's necessary. We tried to, get the ones that we thought were ones that we would like to fill. But I'm not, you know, sure, is this one that's just a hard to fill position? We're not able to. So because of that, I did budget them in there in case they are hired, in case they are necessary.
So I think, and thank you both for that information. Thank you very much. I think where I stand on this is that as it stands, the budget that's been presented to us tonight is 7.9 million drawing from cash reserves, which is 31% of our cash reserves. In your best professional estimate, we could loosen up 4.9 million and still stay with a nice safe cushion of 20% of the total proposed budget. The difference there, or plus those all learner days, I don't know how my colleagues feel about them, but I'm not happy about coming back with a adjusted calendar and having to tell constituents, oh, by the way, we're gonna do this when we already got rid of them. So I see that there's 4.6 million that needs, in my opinion, that needs to be shaved off of this budget. And I could live with it. We would be giving up 4.9 million. The budget would need to give up 4.6 million. That's about a 50-50 split. We shake hands and call it a marriage, so to speak. Mr. Vickers.
One last thing, the 3.6 million for unfilled positions at this point. I'd like to hear the opinion of Dr. Kettler and Ms. Tracy and personnel. What do you think of that? How will it impact the district?
Of the vacant position, I'm, you know, every one, we'd have to look at, you know, what position it is exactly, and that school say, do the, you know, is that a teacher's, you know, is that aides, is that, there's a combination of many positions in there. So, anyway.
Right.
So already, it's earlier visitation. That's.
Well, theoretically, you could move a teacher from RGE to Ann Parrott to cover those kids, right?
We gotta do right grade.
Right.
Right.
Understand, each grade has.
Yeah.
Capacity.
So I think what I'm saying is, if you would be willing to take off line 6 and 7. So just delete them. Highlight A5, highlight it in yellow. Thank you. Highlight A2 in orange. If the board gave up 4.9 out of cash reserves, then what I am saying that the administration needs to come back with a proposed budget to cut out 4.6. I could live with that.
to say that that is, no, but, you know, we already had discussed that any filling positions would be reviewed by the superintendent. However, to get that budget, I will have to show that we are cutting positions to get that much funds. I've already gone through this budget and looked to see, I mean, there's like, I can't say I'm gonna cut legal, because I don't know, I'm gonna pay legal bills. I can't cut, I could run the gamut that my utilities aren't gonna increase that 6%, so that's a part, that was I mean, I put that 6% to be careful, but, you know, may not happen, and if it doesn't happen, then I'm not gonna cut into cash that 6% amount, so. You know, there are many things in there that I cannot get rid of, and without the supplies, it
Right.
is only people.
That's correct. I
Okay.
understand that, but I also understand that when I went back and I reviewed some historical information, and I looked at in our highest enrollment years between 2015 and 2019, 2020, for instance, because we don't have all the complete picture, and I went back and asked different folks, we had 4 cabinet and 16 directors between our highest enrollment period. That is not where we are sitting at now. That's an example of where we have blossomed in some areas that I'm not sure are positively impacting our student proficiency rates, or our graduation rates, or our attendance rates. I don't see the trade-off. I don't see the return on investment. I don't see it.
Can you remind me of those numbers?
Sure,
Exactly what
sure.
you put in?
Sure. Here, I'll go through the slides so that you can see it. Slide 18 is where we have the 7.9 million, the reduction of cash.
Yeah, I've got
Okay? Let's go back to slide 17. Is it slide 17? No, I'm sorry, for the 4.9. Let me get to the right slide. Oh, on 19, excess over 20% in the second column, 2023, 2024. Over 20% would be 4.9. So I subtracted 4.9 from 7.9 and came up with 3 million. But then, and again, this is my opinion, I am not a fan of generating income off of all learner days that our community is not happy about. So I added that back in, because I'm also not a fan of going back to our community and saying, oh, by the way, we don't know how to do a calendar, or we're gonna mess with this calendar and add 8 more days. I'm not a fan of doing that, especially all learner days, So I took the 3 million plus the 1.6 that would be generated from 8 remote learner all thing days. And I came up with 4.6 million.
That have to be cut
Yep,
from what we're being presented.
that way, in my opinion. But this is a discussion. Do we have any other discussion? Have we given the administration plenty to think about? Anybody else? Anything else? This item was for informational purposes and discussion only. No action is warranted or needed. We are at item G, announcement of meetings. And I'm going to try and say all of my dates correctly this time, and Mr. Talley will point them out when I do that, because he caught several of my mistakes last time, and I apologize. Next week, Tuesday, May 14th, the Finance Committee meeting in the CO boardroom at 3:00 p.m. Also on May 14th, the Audit Committee meeting, attendance by Audit Committee members only, will be in the CO conference room or the boardroom at 4:00. On May 21st, 2024, we will be having a board work session. I'm going to announce this topic, but given where we're at, it could change, and I would like the public to be cognizant of this. The board work session will be from 3:00 to 5:00 and include the topic of inclusion, implementation, and partnership with Indiana University, Los Lunas School students with disabilities, what we offer, what we do, what is required, what is needed, specific to students with serious cognitive challenges or other disabilities such as autism, High School Athletics Equity Act, Title IX, and OCR, and our numbers. I believe those are participation numbers. This is a topic requested by Board Member Vickers. On May 21st, we will also have a regular board meeting in this boardroom at 6:00 p.m. With that being said, this leads us to the adjournment of this meeting. I'd stand for a motion to adjourn.
Madam President, I move we adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Is there a second?
That's Mr. Tally.
That's Mr. Tally, it is.
Bennett will second it.
Thank you very much. I am moving to the vote, please. Mr. Vickers,
Yes.
Mrs. Otero,
Yes.
Mr. Tally,
Yes.
Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Meeting is adjourned at 7:43 p.m. Thank you, Mrs. Tracy, for a very nice presentation. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.